Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you, as always, for stopping by. I'm always grateful. Let me start with this. Tanya Schultz operates under the pseudonym Pip and Pop to craft psychedelic candylands full of trinkets, luring viewers to carefree spaces. That was from the Versace Gallery, which I visited not once but twice. And what really struck me, it's a brilliant gallery, modern of course, but really witty, and they've got this selfie exhibition which is pretty amazing as well. But there's this one room where as you walk in, there are about 8 or 9 cameras get trained on you, and they're algorithmically working out if you're related to anyone. Because I went there with Nishit and with Hannah, and of course I picked myself up with Hannah. And it was quite spooky, and I took this photograph of myself as I was sort of getting my head around what was happening in this room. Brilliant place to visit. Fed's balance sheet, this is via business, and you can see that huge QE1, QE2, QE3 expansion. Home Thoughts, the new Museum of Art, Architecture and Technology in Lisbon. Pretty cool, isn't it? I keep playing the same song to myself. It's a very old one called Chic, Good Times. And that took me to the phrase halcyon days, from the Latin Alcyone, daughter of Aeolus and wife of Ceyx. When her husband died in a shipwreck, Alcyone threw herself into the sea, whereupon the gods transformed them both into halcyon birds, kingfishers. When Alcyone made her nest on the beach, waves threatened to destroy it. Aeolus restrained his winds and kept them calm during 7 days in each year, so she could lay her eggs. These became known as the halcyon days, when storms do not occur. Today the term is used to denote a past period that is being remembered for being happy and or successful. Period of calm during the winter when storms do not appear. Nostalgic halcyon days of yore, halcyon days of youth. Oh, youth. William Shakespeare in Henry VI, Part 1. Expect St. Martin's summer, halcyon days, since I've entered into these wars. Ambrose Bierce on a mountain in 1880. And by the way, during those halcyon days, the halcyon was there too, chattering above every creek, as he is all over the world. We fought another battle. Finally, 1891, Walt Whitman. Then for the teeming, quietest, happiest days of all, the brooding, blissful halcyon days. There's a photograph of my mother and myself, and that was indeed a halcyon day at my brother's wedding in Chicago. I've been at home actually on my own for the past few nights. The family's in London still. And I moved all of my parents' furniture from Mombasa, including their 4-poster bed. And because of one thing and another, I didn't want to open a whole bunch of rooms. I ended up sleeping on this bed. And I made up the room for my father. I'm trying to uplift from Mombasa with difficulty. And curiously, I never felt so close to my mother as I have done sleeping in that bed. This is Spinal Tap's $400 million lawsuit. What a great movie. If you haven't watched it, just watch it for some amusement to beg. There's a little clip there which I always go back to, which is this one goes to 11. And just watch it to get a flavour. I like this photograph behind the scenes of the Bahrain Grand Prix with Renault Sport Formula One. Let's move on after all those divergences and meanderings. Political reflections: is populism good or bad for democracy? My biggest issue with populism is this divergence between policy making and the reality. You see that best with these travel bans, where not a single terrorist has emanated from those countries, and places where thousands have come from are, free to fly. And that divergence, I think, is a fault line in the populism story, point of fact. Have a think about that. Paris prosecutor opens terror probe after police officer killed and 2 injured in shooting This is, I am afraid, the new normal, and in particular, I wrote about this. It's a low-cost option, and there are hundreds of people who seemingly are prepared to do this kind of thing, most of whom have led, it looks like, a very sinful, youthful life, and suddenly find God and death, it seems, and murder. North Korea, how to deal with the world's most dangerous regime, The Economist. North Korea can be as confusing as it is alarming. It is a hereditary Marxist monarchy. It has the world's youngest supreme leader and also its oldest. The reigning tyrant, Kim Jong-un, is in his 30s, and his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, is the eternal president despite having died in 1994. To celebrate Grandpa Kim's birthday on April 15th, this grandson ordered warplanes to fly past in a formation, spelling out his age, 105. He also ordered a gigantic parade with goose-stepping soldiers and missiles on trucks. A male-voiced choir belted out, "Peace is guaranteed by our arms," even as the regime threatens to rain nuclear destruction on its enemies and is building a missile designed to reach the continental United States. Dealing with the bellicose junior god king will be one of Donald Trump's trickiest tasks. It will also be the first big test of how he handles relations with China, which are shifting as the rising superpower challenges the Pax Americana nation. Listen to this. A preemptive strike on North Korea would be reckless beyond belief. Its nuclear devices are hidden, possibly deep underground. Its missiles are dispersed on mobile launchers. Tokyo is just across the Sea of Japan. Seoul, the capital of peaceful capitalist South Korea, is only a few miles from the border. Northern artillery and conventional missiles could devastate it. A conflict could rapidly turn nuclear and kill millions. If Mr. Kim were to believe that an American attack is imminent, he might order his own preemptive nuclear attack with disastrous consequences. Mr. Trump should cool his rhetoric immediately, they say. Listen to this, and this is the point. For all his eccentricities, Mr. Kim is behaving rationally. He watched Muammar Gaddafi at Libya give up his nuclear program in return for better relations with the West and end up dead. He sees his nuclear arsenal as a guarantee for his regime. That's a fact. Saying the crucial message from Mr. Kim, as for his predecessors, is that if the North were to use its nukes, the regime would be obliterated. In the long run, reunification is inevitable and desirable. Meanwhile, the junior god king can be deterred, they say. I wrote about this over the weekend when I said the piece de resistance in a geopolitical context. Last week was the news that the US policy of strategic patience with North Korea was over. Trump said we're sending an armada, very powerful. We have submarines, very powerful, the most powerful, more powerful than the aircraft carrier. I thought it was part of the Korean Peninsula. It turns out it was somewhere in Australia. I was going to go there later. Machiavelli argued that sometimes it is a very wise thing to simulate madness, disclosures on Libya. And I was talking about the madman theory, whether President Trump was embracing it. And I was making the same point about nuclear weapons, that Saddam Hussein, who was prone to a similar hyperbole, did not possess a nuclear weapon. That is the difference. And then I said it's impossible to model how little Kim is going to react to what he must perceive as an existential threat to him and his regime. And I said, furthermore, we're dealing with two principles whose very raison d'etre appears to be escalation. I put up a photograph of Kim and his military, another one of the central Pyongyang, North Korea's skyline, pictured at sunset. I wrote a piece in November 2010 called The Hermit Kingdom. Far away, distant lands lies the Hermit Kingdom. This land is ruled by the House of Kim, and its capital is Pyongyang. The first and eternal president was Kim Il-sung, and his successor Kim Jong-il, whose designated successor is Kim Jong-un. They've all had tiny little hands like the elves and the shoemaker. And I said this country has nuclear weapons, and on its border with its neighbor South Korea sit 25,000 American soldiers. Last week the North shelled, and I was talking about what was happening. And I was saying that I thought North Korea was an effective attack dog for China, though clearly the Chinese have changed their tune a little bit of late from that time many years ago. Russia has moved troops to the North Korean border. China has put its bombers on high alert. and Trump hosts these three at the White House. US defense officials call the recent sighting of Russian bombers off the Alaskan coast nothing out of the ordinary. Arresting Julian Assange is a priority, says the US Attorney General Jeff Sessions, given what I believe WikiLeaks' intervention in its coordination. It shows you, right? They're obviously worried he's going to go rogue. And I wrote all about this in that article. We have a deviate tomahawk. The UK general election, Corbyn's vilification and Labour's possible fight, saying a tide of anti-establishment sentiment is surging in the advanced industrial countries, and Corbyn and his associates need to use this to the advantage of Labour. I think Jeremy Corbyn is as electable as Neil Kinnock was not. Car sales in Venezuela have plunged 99.4% from their peak. I wrote about this, saying keep an eye on Caracas, Riyadh, Abuja, Luanda, and all the rest. And then Bloomberg has been on the ground and posted some photographs. This caught my attention. Stones are passed up from the banks of the Guaire River to throw at security forces. Drift analysis says the MH370 likely crashed north of the surge. Well, that was obvious from the very beginning, because I reckon that plane was aiming in a straight line to Diego Garcia. And I wrote about this, but I didn't speculate about Diego Garcia, but I just said the signal announcing this new arrhythmic normal in which we're living in was the disappearance of the MH370. Picking up the signal through the noise of our world in 2014 is no easy thing. And I was talking about the world being arrhythmic. And then it took me to Don DeLillo. We're not witnessing the flow of information so much as pure spectacle, or information made sacred, ritually unreadable. The small monitors of the office, home and car become a kind of idolatry here, where crowds might gather in astonishment. Enough of that. Let's go to the currency markets. Euro dollar 107.23. It's firmed up a little bit of late. Dollar index 99.82. Above that level I've been talking about, 99.50. Japanese yen 109.15. Swiss franc 0.9988. The pound 128.26. 130. Here we come. The Australian dollar 0.7533. India rupee 64.575, South Korean won 11.3350, Brazilian real a little bit softer 3.1484, Egyptian pound 18.099, and the South African rand is at 13.1486. Stunning rebound, dent expected to last. Dollar index, let me put up a chart, and you can see from this chart that 99.50 is a key level. Just do a straight line, you see what I'm saying? And I think if we fall below that, we're going to go back quite sharply. Sterling, let me put up a one-year chart, 128.25. I'm looking for 130 and 140 in point of fact. Commodity markets, on the weekend I said that gold has the potential to go nuclear. It is the purest geopolitical proxy in the markets, as Ben Bernanke once said. People hold gold as protection against what we call tail risks, really, really bad outcomes. And, given what's happening in the Korean Peninsula, one can see anything kicking off, and that thing's going through the roof. I'll put up a chart. I think the target is now $13.50. Brent crude, $53.43. I think if it breaks down another 50 cents, it's going to break through 50. The rebound after a steep sell-off on Wednesday has been anemic, and I just think that we're going to see a further sharp sell down here. Brent, the benchmark for more than half the world's oil, was trading 5 cents higher at $53.04. Prices dropped on Wednesday after the EIA data showed US gasoline supplies increased for the first time since February, and crude production rose for a 9th straight week. I think more than that was the weekly increase in crude production. Because I remember reading it and thinking, God, I should sell. And the reaction was a bit delayed. Mine as well. Cocoa futures have plummeted since last year on the back of bumper crops around the world and stagnant demand. Cocoa futures slumped to a 9.5-year low on Wednesday. London market dropped to its lowest since 2013. Big problems in Ivory Coast. However, in another article I read, they're advising it's time to load up on chocolates before cocoa rebounds. Cocoa's fallen 42% over the last 12 months, making it the worst performer among 34 commodities tracked by Bloomberg. Let's move on to Africa. ISS today, new division threatens stability in the DRC. You can say that again. 2 political accords and 3 prime ministers later, and 4 months after Congolese President Joseph Kabila was due to leave office at the end of his second mandate, credible elections and political stability in the DR Congo appear more elusive than ever. The 31st December political accord, brokered in good faith by the Catholic Conference Episcopale Nationale du Congo, CENCO, remains the only viable blueprint for political stability in the DRC. It calls for elections by the end of 2017. There's no chance of that happening. No third mandate for Kabila. Well, he's not going to go for it. He's going to sit and not move. And the formation of a new government led by a prime minister issued from the ranks of the Rassemblement de l'Opposition, RASOP, country's largest political opposition alliance, led until his death on 1st February by Etienne Tshisekedi. By getting the disparate parties to implement the 31st December Accord, letter and spirit was always going to be difficult, mainly because it involved concrete concessions from the ruling presidential alliance, the majority presidentielle, the MP, which has been the architect of the glissage, delaying strategy that has allowed Kabila to remain in office past December 2016. Look, he's on the front foot as far as we can see. Protests have not hit him that hard. He's managed to damp those down. I know I wrote a couple of times saying there's a tipping point, but he's kept it well below it for now. And he's kicked out his main opposition candidate, and he's scattered them to the winds. And he's very cryptic, oftentimes enigmatic. But Kabila is the puppet master par excellence. Zambian President Lungu says he may declare a state of emergency. Why are they burning markets? Of course, it's jailed the opposition leader for treason. Why are they burning courthouses? Why are they burning government buildings? If you force us to call a state of emergency, we will go that way. It's very, very adversarial. And, this kind of language is quite alarming. Chinese businesses quit Angola after disastrous currency blow. Tens of thousands of Chinese left Angola because of the oil slump that's hurt businesses and halted construction projects, according to the head of Commerce Group. The number of Chinese workers and business owners have fallen to about 50,000, a quarter of what it was 4 years ago, Zhu Ning. Last year was very bad. We lost a lot of money. Many closed down their businesses and went back to China crying. And basically, it's a lot to do with the currency collapse. The currency collapsed incredibly. I've been saying for a while, keep an eye on Caracas. You saw what's happening there. Riyadh, well, they've got a few buffers. It's going to take longer to play out. Abuja, they've thrown a Hail Mary pass. They've been patting themselves on the back, but if the oil price drops again, they're in trouble. Luanda and all the rest. South African oil shares up 3.64% this year. Dollar versus rand. What a rebound. President Zuma must be having a chuckle. Nigerian oil share down 5.9%. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index up 10.7%. Malawi cracks down on food smugglers seeking more profit. They've had a bumper harvest and the higher prices in other countries are not being allowed to export. Tightened its border controls to stop profiteers smuggling much-needed maize out of the country in search of higher prices. Kenya's leader warns against violence as poll fever hits. As a party, we will not tolerate violence. As president, I will also not tolerate violence, and anybody who engages in acts of violence will be dealt with in accordance with the law, irrespective of who they are. Kenyatta told a press conference, and we got not just one sort of head-to-head presidential election, but we got many, many county-level elections. So I think we're going to see a disbursement of violence, unfortunately. African governments have a new way of controlling the media, starve them of ad revenue. Look at this. National governments remain the single largest source of revenue for news organizations in Africa. In Rwanda, for example, a staggering 85 to 90% of advertising revenue comes from the public sector. In Kenya, it's estimated that 30% of newspaper revenues come from government advertising. In 2013, the government spent 40 million shillings in 2 weeks just to publish congratulatory messages for the new president, Uhuru Kenyatta. But with the general election coming up this year in August, the Kenyan government has decided to stop advertising in local commercial media. This is particularly problematic for the Daily Nation, flagship newspaper of the Nation Media Group. The great urban racket, exploitation and short-sightedness in Africa's slums. Basically saying that on a per square foot basis, people living in slums are paying more than people living in the most expensive parts of Nairobi's suburbs. Very interesting piece. Kenya shilling last at 103.395. Nairobi all share up 0.33% this year. Britam's corporate affairs director, Muthoga Ngera, told Business Daily that Britam now holds 8.2% of equity as opposed to 9% that they held in December 2015. The NSE 20 is down 1.16% this year, but in fact has rallied 12.893% since the 30th of March, when it closed at a multi-year low. Safaricom unchanged for the year, share price data is up there. KCB up 18.26% year to date, and that's without accounting for the full year dividend, which is very juicy, 3 shillings a share. Kenya Airways is up 6.83% so far this year. Sasini Tea, best performer at the stock exchange, if I'm not mistaken, up 45.83%. And finally, KEMRI, the Kenya Medical Research Institute, has warned that increased use of antibiotics to boost growth of animals is endangering the health of meat consumers. All the data I'm seeing is signaling that it's severe pollution in our food and everything that we're eating. It's a bit of a worry. But let me leave you on a more positive note, wishing you a wonderful weekend, and thank you for stopping by.